the moment until Albie Williams returns. The agenda tonight will be the usual right-of-way issues, followed by landscape ordinance issues, and then several other standard items. The first issue is 89 Mill, a request to prune a silver maple, which has been visited by Anne Bonner, and she thinks it's a reasonable thing to do. Have any of the other Tree Commission members had a look at this tree?
I have,
yeah.
And I agree with Anne about the limited pruning that they want to do.
Okay, okay. So we're all agreed we'll let the owner do the limited pruning that they need to do. Good, thank you. Next one is a request for removal of 2 pine trees, one of which is dead at 82 North Lancaster. I would agree the one that's dead should be removed, but I'm not certain that the one that's alive should be removed. It didn't seem to be presenting too much of a problem.
Yeah, I agree. There are Norway spruce, and the second one appeared quite healthy, and I didn't see any real problems with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same here. I saw the same thing.
Yeah, and I couldn't see an issue really with the cables. These are all low voltage cables. They're not being caused any problems. So we'll give them permission to remove the one dead one, but not the live one.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. At the last meeting, we were asked to have a look at a dead sugar maple that's at the corner of Carpenter and North Congress. That's, I think the only live thing about it are the vines growing.
Yeah.
I presume that it'll be a request for the city to remove it. I don't know that the owner is going to want to remove it, but I haven't got the actual piece of paper in front of me. What did other people think of it?
It's a large tree.
Yes.
It will need professional removal. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And interestingly, that's John Sawash's building, and I saw him, and I told him about it, because the city's actually pruned that before for him, and he said, oh no, I already called the city, and they're going to remove it for me.
Okay.
So, but then I also learned that I think that the street department might be letting another contract, I guess there's some bid out. I talked to Randy Shoes yesterday, so maybe if we could get that tree and maybe some of those other ones on, the city might save some money. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure he didn't know whose name was on that contract
But
bid,
there is
so.
no reason to keep it, is there?
No.
It needs to go.
And it probably needs to go relatively soon.
It's a hazard.
It's
Yes.
in a
Yeah.
It's only
very
going to
prominent.
get more expensive to
Yeah.
remove as the longer we wait.
Yeah,
It's
and it's
in
a
a very
good site for
prominent location if it did come down in the
Yeah.
storm.
Yeah.
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 And it's a good site for a new tree anyway.
2 new trees.
Yes.
Is there a sense of how old it is? I mean, how long it's been dead?
It's been in decline for 10 years.
Okay.
You know, so it was holding on. You know, it's just like every other sugar maple in town.
So maybe it's been
Just-
dead less than a year, maybe?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Finally, I think it kicked the bucket. Maybe maybe June it started. It
Oh,
even had
okay.
some life in it.
Oh, okay, so now is a good time, because when it's totally dead, then that's really expensive.
Yeah, I think the longer we wait, 'cause
Right.
it gets a little unstable and arborists don't
Right.
want to.
Okay, we'll get that one removed. That's, I think, the end of the right-of-way tree permit issues, unless there are any more that commissioners have got. Nope, okay. In that case, we'll move along to 2022 Oak Street. I circulated a copy of the documents I'd got on this, which were basically a resubmission of some documents we saw at the meeting last month. I did mark on the existing tree at 20 Oak Street, which is a silver maple, and the fact that there are 2 sweet gums very close together and a juniper, I think it is, at the front of 22 Oak Street. There is also a small pear tree at the side, but I don't think we would count that in amongst the trees needed for this site, but we can certainly count one of those sweet gums towards the total number of trees, and that juniper, I think, at the front should also be counted as well. Sorry?
Arborvitae.
It's an arborvitae, is it? I'm sorry. Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, it's always one or the other, and I always manage
They're
to get them
hard.
sweet.
Junipers are prickly, and that one's a soft one. That's actually a nicer tree.
Oh,
That's a
okay.
real nice.
Yeah, so we really do want to keep that one.
Yeah, it's a nice. It's
Okay.
nice.
Yeah,
acid.
because as far as I can tell, under the new landscape ordinance, these sites will require 2 trees each. The two, we can, for 22 oaks, we can count the existing trees. And all you've got to do is try and keep at least one of those sweet gums going. And you might as well just leave the 2 of them. I don't see any.
Oh, they were both very healthy.
Yeah, I mean,
If they're not in the way.
yeah.
I don't
But
know.
the rule is the
Okay.
trees have to be 30 feet apart to count. So they count as one tree basically for the moment.
Now, you're saying 2 additional trees?
No. It only requires 2 trees
Okay, I see.
for each site.
Okay.
The sites are, I think, 3,600 square feet, just a little bit over, and that means that they only require two trees for each site. And the silver maple that's on 20, as long as that one can be preserved, that can count as one tree. And what we like, I think, is to have 1 tree planted at the front of that. The reason for that is that you've got AEP high voltage cables at the back of that property, and we wouldn't recommend planting trees underneath there unless you want some for providing some sort of buffer between them. Which actually is the other issue that needs to be addressed at some point, although this again is a site where I'm not sure a buffer is really needed. The new landscape ordinance says that there should be a buffer between you and the adjacent properties unless you and the adjacent owner agree that there doesn't need to be a buffer. And so as long as that can be recorded by the code office that there's no need for the buffer because the relative owners agree, then that's fine. That's fine by us. But that's one of the conditions in the new landscape ordinance. And certainly at the back you've got a great big wall, so I'm not sure there's any need for a buffer at that point. And I think on the north side you've now got that new Palmer place. I'm not sure what they're planning on doing in terms of their buffer, because they should be buffering from you as well. I mean, because so as long as you can agree on what's going to happen there, then that's fine.
Well, the Palmer Street project, I talked to the owner yesterday, and this weekend they're going to be leveling up some of the land that will be green and planting grass seed as early as Monday, providing nothing goes wrong. So we're making progress there, and then also close to these gentlemen's property also.
Yeah.
Now, 1 tree at 20 and 1 tree at 22, is that correct?
No, just one additional tree at 20.
At 20.
Yeah, in the front.
Okay.
And I'll write a letter summarising this.
Oh, okay.
And what I can do is address it to you, if
Sure.
you like, or else Mr. Luke, I don't know which is the...
Both of us. Or if I give it to me, I'll take care of it. I'll work with them.
Yeah, because what we've done in the past with all these is we've given you copies of our decisions, so you can record them in the property files in the code office.
Right.
Then if there are questions later on, people know in the city know where to go to get the answers.
Sure.
Because for a number of years the tree commission files were kept separately from the code office files, and we decided a couple of years ago that didn't make sense to do that.
A question about the silver maple. It had some extensive vine coverage on it, way up into the tree. Do you recommend, just for the health of the tree, removal of that, or?
Slowly. Sometimes it can be really shocking for a tree. It's
To lose that
obviously going
cover,
to undergo
okay.
a little bit of stress from the proposed construction as well. So, yeah, probably some of those vines are going to get killed too when they start to really move around.
Okay, I was just curious because there was quite a few different species that had almost every native species of vine on it.
Including poison ivy?
Actually, that was the one that was not represented. It was pretty much grapevine, trumpet
Surprising.
creeper, Virginia creeper.
It didn't seem pulling.
Okay.
Or did you?
Well, I wasn't sure if over time it was going to create some dead limbs up high. That was my fear.
Well, like any big tree, it's like anything that you're managing on your property. I mean, it's something that should be looked at periodically by an arborist and maintained.
Okay.
Just like you have people clean your gutters or manage your pipes.
Right, manage your vines.
Yeah, manage.
Gotcha. Okay.
Vine management.
Okay, so is everyone happy with 20 and 22 Oak Street? That way? Okay. Do you have any questions at all at the moment? Okay. So we'll move on to...
The only question I got, the last time we were here, it was suggested about keeping the gravel.
Yes, that's right. You were interested in that option.
Right.
I'm certainly willing to write a letter to the Code Office saying that, if the rest of the Tree Commission are willing. I know that there are some reservations about this, that putting a permeable surface down is clearly much better for the trees and for storm drainage and so on.
Impermeable? Or, yeah.
So no, permeable. We want a
Permeable, right, sorry, right.
Yeah, we don't want concrete or blacktop water,
right.
because then we finish up with runoff problems and trees that are short of water. And so in the past, the situations like this where there doesn't seem to be an obvious problem in terms of water running out into the street and so on, that we would recommend that they go to the Zoning Board of Appeals and ask for permission to have a permeable surface there.
Well, and that would be one of, I would recommend that too, because to deal with the water runoff after it's paved, my goodness.
That would be tricky in that site. Yeah.
I mean, we're talking thousands of dollars of construction work to put in drains for that. But
yeah. And given the fact that the sort of traffic you're going to get in a parking lot like this is fairly small, I mean, quite often students, I presume, are the people who are going to rent these places. They're probably not going to move their cars more than once or twice a week, I would think.
Thursday and come back Sunday.
Or whatever, yeah. So it isn't as if it's a highly trafficked parking area at all, like a store would be or so on. And so I think, again, it's a reasonable thing for us to do, and certainly I will thank you for pointing that out. I'll put that in the letter as well, that we'll recommend that. And then you'll have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals and make the request, but Chuck will then point out to them that the Tree Commission back this request. Yeah.
That's next.
Okay. Anything else on the Oak Street properties? Nope. Good. 21 Kurtz. This again is a site that needs two large shade trees. It doesn't have any trees on at the moment. In the drawing it's proposed to plant trees at the back, but again this is underneath some high voltage cables in a site that we wouldn't recommend really for planting trees. I would like to see at least one tree at the front of the property. Is it possible to plant one close to the house rather than putting it right at the back?
Yeah, that would be.
Okay. See, with the new landscape ordinance, we don't try and tell people where to put them. We just recommend it.
My understanding that it is supposed to be in the back end, and whatever you guys want.
You have the freedom to plant them where you want. We would really like street trees if we can, and so one at the front would be good.
I wouldn't mind putting two in the front either.
Okay, it's your choice. As long as they're more than as long as they are at least 30 feet apart. That's the constraint on them.
Okay,
And they're shade trees.
Right.
Yeah. And we can deal with particular recommendations if you need them for these things. But and again, presumably you want to have a permeable parking lot surface for this one too. Are there any other questions about this site?
So we have one tree for 20 and 22, and two trees for 21, and
yes,
all three of them will be shade trees.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, if there's no further questions, we'll move on. Thank you, gentlemen.
Appreciate it, folks.
Okay.
Take care.
See you guys.
See you.
The next item then will be the Hickory Creek development, which is, I think, the biggest development in area that we have seen before the Tree Commission. I think all of us managed to visit it at some time in the last month to appreciate the scale of the operation. Bill Bias called me today and said he regretted that he wouldn't be able to be with us this evening. He hoped we wouldn't have any particular questions that hadn't been answered already. I think that the only issues I think we have with this are that he wants to retain as clear a view as he can on the west, in particular the southwest side of the property. And this may mean fewer trees than the landscape ordinance requires. Certainly the version before the beginning of the year, the old Title 37. And I think it should be approved under the new Title 37, partly because he has got more than 50% coverage. When I calculated it out, I think it was closer to 55% of the lot is already covered with trees, which is, you know, an impressive coverage, and he has no plans at the moment to remove that, and I can't see why he would. I mean, there's very steep sides where these trees are, or else along the banks of the Hocking River. There's also a large area now where there's going to be water, which reduces the fraction where trees could be planted anyway. And so I think what we should do is give him preliminary approval, subject to the final plans, because as always with these large developments, you can never be certain that what you're seeing now is what's actually going to happen at the end of the day, and that we should give him preliminary approval to proceed. I will circulate a letter amongst you all so you see what we're doing in that. But I think it would be best for him to be approved of the new landscape ordinance, because there are some difficult parking lot areas in here which, if you have to apply the old rules of no more than 10 spaces at a time without tree islands and so on, then he certainly wouldn't meet those requirements. Whereas under the new ordinance, he has more freedom in where he can plant trees around the building. And so if he feels he really needs to have more than 10 spaces for cars in a row here, then so be it. They can do that, and then they can plant the trees to fit the property better. Are there any questions about this one? It's a very big thing.
Yeah.
I think on that west side, we had talked about possibly having large shade trees that could be limbed up.
Yes.
So it would be possible to see underneath them.
Yeah.
And I think that if he could do that, it would be very desirable.
Yeah.
And the way trees grow in these kind of sites is so slowly that when people worry, about the curtain effect, that we've heard, or, blocking visibility, it often is a non-issue. So I'd really encourage him to kind of, put them in there, and you worry about that stuff as it happens.
Well, I think it'll become obvious once the building is there that there are certain key places where trees won't obstruct the view at all,
Right.
and that they'll be able to plant the trees there. And they may be able to plant 2 trees in a line, for instance.
Yes.
And that'll again satisfy us in terms of tree coverage, and satisfy them in terms of line of sight.
Yeah, clustering, that's great.
It doesn't fall under our purview, I'm pretty sure, but when we were walking around there, I was concerned about erosion, and I was wondering, will the plans have to pass other groups who might say, you've got a lot of erosion here, this is not good for the stream or for the stability? Do you know?
Where the building's going to be, is that what you're talking about?
No, I was thinking about beyond the building.
Towards their body of water?
Around the
Towards-
water.
Yeah,
Right.
which is a pretty steep
Right.
cutoff at this point.
We can
It
see
could
there've
be
been.
erosion with a heavy storm.
Well, we saw evidence of erosion
Yeah.
when we were there.
And I wouldn't have an idea how to control that without putting some concrete or a rock
Trees.
trees. Well, we had to get some fast-growing ones because
But no, but that can be stabilized
Sure.
with plants and then
Yeah.
trees or shrubs or something like that.
Well, I'm sure that Mr. Bias in this project is going to want to make it as attractive to the community as he can. And I think he would be easily persuaded to do something like that.
Yeah. Well, I just didn't know if there was another group who would
Oh.
say, excuse me, but we're heading for trouble here if
Not that I
something
know
isn't
of.
done. Oh, okay.
There's state guidelines,
For the
guidelines
nursing
or
home.
regulation, but I think it's you can't have sediment come off your property. I'm not really well versed in it. I know the guy that handles it through EPE's office in Logan, and he's got 23 counties, so I know a lot. Yeah, a lot of falls through the cracks. No pun intended.
Right.
But
I know, I just.
I think the sediment has to be any sediment that comes off has to be specifically related to the development. So if it's a no fault of the pad itself or the structure of the building, if it's natural erosion, then that's a different story, I think.
Well, this site
Well-
has been excavated. I mean,
Right,
the site's
right,
already
right.
been-
It was
Yeah,
the,
it would relate to the
the
construction.
moved soil
Yeah,
that
it
was
could
being
easily be.
eroded.
Yeah.
It's the site down on Columbus.
I really don't have an answer, but
Okay, I just
will,
didn't-
I'll look into it though.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, it's a shame when things happen and then they look back and they say, oh, well, they should have, done it, and
Right.
here's what they should have done.
Right.
So,
I'm pretty sure that on the web, I recall some sort of document that kind of outlines the state expectations or guidelines. I don't know if they're regulations, but maybe we could look at that. They're good guidelines because they protect this property too.
They're probably going to stabilize it with grasses and stuff. If not, it's going to undercut the building and it's going to kind of fall in.
No,
Why
but this
wouldn't they
wasn't-
have done that?
right, this isn't
Because
close to the
they're going to
building.
wait till they build it,
Yeah,
I
the
mean,
moment,
that's just a pad.
all these slopes
Yeah.
here, which are about 20 feet or so, drop.
I understand.
Are not protected at all.
Right, but the pad is close to the finished pad, right?
Yeah, I
They have a
why-
little more topsoil to add, I think.
Right, why wouldn't you have stabilized it already if you were going to? I mean, I.
construction type, they probably patching it at the end. Who knows?
Okay.
But there's a lot of cuts.
I
Here
guess I
that
wouldn't,
go
I
in real
wouldn't
deep.
presume that they're going to do that, although, on the other side of the coin is that more so than satisfying the community, that they would be wanting to satisfy the community of the people that are living there.
Yeah.
I mean, they have some need to make sure that it's attractive to the residents, or potential residents, but I wouldn't assume that they're gonna do that.
Well, the soil that they put up there is just keep on,
Right.
every time it rains,
Right.
it's just going
That,
to wear
but I mean,
away.
that's why, most of these sites, when you do excavation work, you do some, some temporary stabilization.
Okay.
Even if you weren't done with it, you typically would do something like that. Particularly if the site is gonna sit dormant for a period of time.
Is the sediment going into a detention pond?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so maybe-
this thing forms one great big detention pond with an outlet over here into the Hocking River.
But isn't that supposed to be an attractive lake
Oh,
or
yeah.
pond,
Yeah.
not something to fill up with
Yeah.
all
Yeah,
the sediment?
I'm
Yeah,
sure
but I
that's
mean, things
the
can
end result.
can have more than one function.
But, yes, but it may catch sediment, but if there's too much sediment, it's going to ruin the pond.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, I think they would be very concerned about their structure before they got too much sediment in that pond from this piece here.
That pond is gonna get sediment. At some point down the road, they're going to have to clean it, if they're gonna
Well,
maintain.
the
this
river might help do that
attractive
for them
lake
anyway.
Or
but-
whatever.
Is this still above the flood zone? I mean, we've just been talking that there's been a lot of erosion off of that. Is it still above it?
Well, it'll have to be when it's built.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, the erosion we saw, I think, was mainly over on this side, running down the sides. But it was surprising that it hadn't been stabilised with grass or something.
Yeah, you would think, again, if you were gonna let the site sit dormant while you finished plans and got the approvals, you'd have stabilized
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Anyway, I will note our concerns about erosion in the thing. We used to have some language in Title 37 about planting of steep slopes and so on, but I think when we adopted the new version, or recommended council adopt the new version, we felt there was no need, that this was sort of obvious that people should do these things. Maybe we need to go back, put it back out of that. But anyway. So, any further questions? I will circulate the letter amongst us all before we submit
Thanks
it.
for all your work on that.
Okay. I have a request for 106 Mill Street. We haven't got all the paperwork yet. I guess you haven't received anything further, Chuck. This will be a similar request to the ones at Oak and Kurt Street.
Right.
The owner needs to install a parking lot at the back of the property. There's a
He already
line.
has the parking lot. It's already done, so,
Well, he hasn't paved it yet, has he?
no.
No.
He wants to defer that until next year.
I think it's a good idea. We would encourage him not to pave anyway. What he's got at the back is one large walnut tree. There is a silver maple that's not too clever, halfway across the property. But I think if it could be saved, a tree that's already rooted and growing is probably better than a brand new tree put into these sites. And so if he only needs 2 trees, he may have the 2 trees he needs. He is interested though in putting a tree at the front of the property, and so if he needs 3 trees, then we'll encourage him to put a tree at the front of the property as well.
Is this right across from Palmer? Directly across?
No, no.
Okay. It's
No,
okay.
You'll
There were
have our
two-
house on Oak Street.
It's at the,
I know which
I
one.
think it's at
At our house.
the corner. Well, it's just round the corner from. Is it Oak Street?
Yeah.
Yeah,
around
it.
no, I know the house actually,
Yeah.
worked there
Yeah.
20 years ago.
Pardon?
Is he being required to make a parking lot in the
Yes.
back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just because of the density?
I don't know what's going. I don't know what. I don't worry about that. That isn't my problem. But because he's putting the parking lot in, he
I'll
has to
take care
conform.
of it.
He has to conform to the landscape
Right, I
ordinance.
think you have to
and the
have
con-
one parking space per
Occupant.
occupant, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Chuck, it really doesn't have to come back to us if what
Oh.
you see there is sufficient. I mean, basically, it's 1 tree for every 1,767 square feet.
Well, I'm
And-
learning, and
Yeah, Obviously, yeah.
and
But
I don't want to take any chances.
Yeah, but I think looking at it, it'll either be 2 or 3 trees.
Yes, I think
Um,
that site's bigger than I don't know if it's big enough to get to the 3rd
Yeah.
tree or not, but it's a bigger site.
Yeah, and then I've explained to him about the buffering rule as well, that he needs to
Right.
figure out with the adjacent owners what they want to do with the buffering.
Okay.
Because the adjacent owners don't have parking lots yet, and
Would the tree commission consider recommending him to not pave, or?
again we would do that. Yes, yeah. To again, because the site, it's sloping away from the streets.
Right.
There's no need to worry about runoff into the street from his property, and therefore it'll be better for the trees.
And then as long as there's some permeable material in
Yeah.
there to
Yeah.
leach the water, well, that'll be
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there are many alternatives. There are many types of permeable.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Doesn't have to be gravel.
Yeah.
The other thing, can I just add something real quick? I think for the record, if we're gonna be allowing people to retain, the existing trees, to make up, there's gonna be so much compaction and inevitably some excavation, even with the gravel. What if those trees die, or what if
They have to be replaced.
Yeah, they'd be required to
Or,
replace them.
but what if they, like the one, I think in my email to you, like what if it dies and falls over onto a neighbor or something? I mean, what kind of, just, liability issues are we?
We don't have any.
Okay, but they do, and
They do,
do we have
yes.
an obligation to kind of like, that big trees might not be, some of those trees, what if they can't survive that, that kind of change in the
Well,
grade and
well,
the.
you have
What
to
we're
just
actually
keep an eye
proposing
on
is a more minimal
Yeah, I agree.
procedure than putting a concrete or an asphalt
Yeah.
parking lot in. So I think we're doing what we should do.
Okay, and that's being made
Yeah.
clear to them.
If you just have a few cars, and if they're not moving around that much, I've seen many places with big, nice trees in parking, in gravelled parking areas. Just saw them in Williamsburg, in fact.
Yeah, Williamsburg is.
Yeah, and in fact, that walnut, I think, is far enough back. It'll have to be protected, just like any
Well,
any
see,
of
that's the
trees.
thing, it's not probably the purview of this group, but in looking at 20 and 22 and even Kurt Street, how do you keep vehicles from hitting the trees?
What we've done in the past-
Or doing what somebody was saying, compacting, getting so close that you're compacting the root structure?
They have to either put in barriers that are horizontal barriers, or I think on Mill Iron there was a property there, and he put in vertical posts around the trees. But it's up to the owners to figure out how to protect them. But certainly,
But who's watching over that to make sure that happens?
Code office.
Code office.
We are.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So
I can certainly put in each of these letters that point out that the landscape ordinance requires them to protect the trees. in this
I
way.
would do that, actually, as
Yes.
part of the letter.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That should be, and we could just have a form.
There's a certain paragraph that's kind of,
Yeah.
it plugs into every letter or
Right,
something.
right,
like that.
right.
There is, Marietta has a little brochure for contractors that are doing work in the right-of-way that impacts existing street trees. I can email that to you guys, or if did anybody recall seeing that? I know
No,
at
but
one-
it'd be interesting to look at,
Yeah.
yeah.
I will, but you send it to Teresa?
Sure, just send it to Tracy, she'll give it to me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm thinking that I'll find the piece, but I'm pretty sure that language was actually retained in Title 37, that they have to protect the
I think that's a really good
the
point.
trees.
Because it may be obvious, but
Yeah.
Well, when I was looking at 20 and 21 and looking at them proposing those trees along the backside,
Yeah. There's no way.
how's this possible? There's a building back there, and and how you gonna keep the cars? I mean, you gotta, because it was gravel rolling right back to the buildings and stuff. That wasn't gonna work.
But they're being made, is there a reason why there's a rash of these? I know I don't want to take time from the meeting, sorry.
I don't know. I've no idea. I mean, Chuck, have you any
They
idea
must
why
be
this is
being
suddenly
cited.
happening?
Well, it's just the people are wanting, they know that the city wants parking,
Yeah.
and they know that they have to comply, and some of these are private homes, like the Have Our House is recently being converted from a private or a commercial use to residential, typically with the students down there. and
Right.
They have to provide parking, that's it.
Yeah.
To
So it
make
almost
the
always
conversion.
has to be in the
And I-
back.
Oh, okay, so when you make the conversion, that's when code
They
would,
have to come up to date with the current
they'd be
regulations.
inspected and right.
Yeah.
And I suspect it's because of the summer, when all the work is done, that's
Yeah.
why we have
Right.
had a lot of them come to us at this point in time.
As soon as the students get back in class and in these houses, then pretty much construction stops, unless it's emergency repairs.
Yeah, I have
Oh.
the paragraph on vehicular encroachment if you wanted to see it, but
Oh, good.
found it in the
Yeah,
ordinance.
it's all right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I thought it was in there.
two very clear sentences, so should go well in a letter.
Good, okay.
I had a question for Ann about that maple at 106. That small maple that seems to be dying from the top. Do you think that that is not a serious problem?
Well, that's kind of why I brought up, the issue, that, if the tree falls on the house and we said keep it,
Well, but that's a small one, that's not
That's a
going to...
tiny tree, yeah.
What's that?
That's a small tree. It's not big enough to fall on the house, is it?
Well, I mean, there's two big dead branches, it was one of those marginal trees. I mean, I think that in my recommendations, I said it's marginal, I don't think it's an immediate hazard. It's just one of those things though, if all of a sudden the site changes to accommodate cars, it
Yeah.
causes increased stress on the tree dies, were we better off just saying, okay, you can cut the tree down but put two back or something? I just was trying to
Okay.
think long-term, is it really realistic to
there-
think that tree can survive? I don't know the impact of the use either,
Okay.
who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
How-
there are two trunks coming about from the base, and is that going to make it particularly weak over time?
Well, I mean, one thing I
It's a
would...
marginal tree,
Okay.
you're right.
I mean, when I spoke to him, I recommended that he try and get the thing pruned into some shape, and then take it from there. Because I
Okay.
still think that if you can keep a tree that's already got roots there, it's probably better than planting a new one.
Exactly, and it's got that
Okay.
nice Rosa Sharon protecting it.
I'll go with that.
Thank
I'll go
gosh
with
for the
that.
Rosa Sharon.
And this is on Mill Street, not known for the best tree nursery, shall we say.
Yes.
The small trees don't thrive.
Well, this is in the
there.
back of the house, so it's,
Okay,
it's
that's,
not...
that's all right. There, people go behind houses too.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was quite the evidence of, there was foam, there was soil compaction. I mean, you could tell there had been some parties there. There was foam from probably an old furniture and lots of litter, lots of Pabst Blue Ribbon cans, when I was there, so.
Live bands.
It's right, if there's an existing tree that survived, that's probably why those two dead branches are in it.
Yeah. Okay. That brings us, I think, to the end of the landscape ordinance issues, unless there's anything else that people have got. The website. I was in touch with Anita today. She has nothing further to update us on. She's still waiting to hear back from Paula Mosley and Ron Forrest regarding the approval of what we're trying to do and establishing the formal process for us updating things. I'm a bit surprised it takes as long as this to get these things done, but I guess that's what we have to live with.
Also, the city's website is going to be undergoing a major change, so that might be part of the delay. Yeah.
Fine.
So.
One day it'll happen. I noticed that several titles and emails were still not correct on the link. Anyway, maybe that will be changed. But that's where we are with the website. On the Emerald Ash Borer, I don't think we've got anything further to report on that. I need to do a little bit of math on the numbers we've got to give to you, either for the next meeting or for the October meeting.
The guy from Hocking College did do a little more inventorying, and he actually did inventory West State Street ball diamonds. So that was one of the goals that Ron Lucas had,
Okay.
in light of all the problems we had in the spring with the tree mortality and trees disappearing.
Mhm.
So hopefully I'll have a product for you all in the next month.
So you think you'll have some more data that I could then put into, because the position that I'm in at the moment with the data we've got is that there's a good deal of uncertainty because we're only dealing with a small fraction of the city. Obviously, the more data we get, the more certainty I can give to
He
the...
did the west side, and I think there were maybe 2 more ash trees.
Oh.
But, so the interesting thing was we covered more ground, but there wasn't really a lot more trees to add. In fact, I'll tell you, where all the ash trees were at John Katowski's facilities building over, right across from, the place, I can't think of the name of it.
Where are you talking now? Where is it at?
It's where you saved that linden tree, right down by Factory Street in West Union.
Okay.
There's about 4 really nice 5-inch.
Oh, is that next to the old dance factory area?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, so they line
Yeah,
the street
yeah,
there,
yeah.
and they're all ash.
Mhm.
Well, actually, there's some maples, but there were about four ash trees, and that was really the only ones that we really added to the inventory.
Okay.
So these were planted, these weren't native?
Yeah, just before.
But these were, but those
After
are
we took the
city
houses
trees,
down
right?
that were there and we planted them.
Yeah.
The ash are actually right in front of the brick building.
Okay.
The maples are kind of where those houses were.
Okay.
So is that university land then?
Mhm.
Okay.
But I'd say that's
All
public
the way
right of
to
way
the
where the
alley.
trees are, isn't it?
So-
I don't know. I don't know for sure.
Mhm.
Always
you
leaves
really-
us with an interesting
you
question.
got to survey it to decide, where the right-of-way is. If you looked at that HR training facility is pretty far forward, and that's on our property. So I don't know, there's a sidewalk there and there's a small green space, but there's not very much. So I don't know. You'd have to look down through there, and that would be the best indicator, I think, is where that building's at, because I know that building's on our property. But, the way to know for sure is to survey it. You never know whether the road's in the center of the right-of-way or where
Sure.
it all falls.
Probably not.
Right.
So anyway, thank you. More data, good.
More data, but not more ash, so to
That's
speak.
even better, right?
That's even
right,
better,
yeah.
yeah. Do you recall how the park came out? Because you said that he'd surveyed the park.
I haven't seen the data yet, so
Okay.
I set them up and we've,
Okay.
gave them the maps and the data sheets, but
Because it's the parks I worry about.
there aren't a lot of ash in the parks. There
Good.
really aren't. But
And again, if they're not near to where people are going to be, we don't have to worry that much. Because if
Yeah.
they fall away from the public areas, that
I'll tell you where
doesn't
there's a big ash right next to the depot, the train depot. There's a nice big one. That'll be unfortunate when that one goes.
Is that in the right of way, you think?
No, it's not. So we didn't even include it. We walked. There were maybe 2 or 3 on that property. One real nice one, but like I said, we
Because
covered a lot.
that's
of
the other issue we're going to have to face is how do we communicate to the public what their responsibilities are going to be and what their liabilities might be when this happens.
Yeah.
Because
Hey,
I
how
know
about a
that in
website?
that. Pardon?
How about a website?
Good idea, we'll have to get on
But
that.
I know in the first survey, or the first time we walked out in that area behind your area, where the ODNR offices are.
Yeah, there's sure a
there's
lot of
an
ash
awful
trees.
lot of ash trees in that area on private land.
I think the bigger issue, and again, not to blink through the meeting, but what's already happening is the commercial landscapers and arborists are clamoring. This is going to be a boom for people who make their living off of maintaining trees. And I think for us to be educated and to be a good resource for what's reasonable and what's not, and what chemicals are safe and which aren't. So there's going to be a lot. I think that's really what we can focus on on the private end.
Well, there are no chemicals that are really useful.
Okay, and which
are
are
they?
futile, which is all.
There's two that are being marketed and being used, and you know, I got a call yesterday from an arborist that's already using them in the city with a person who had what they thought was a valuable ash tree. So, yes, the science is
Has the ISA said anything about these chemicals at all?
Say again?
Has the ISA said anything about it? International Society of Arborists? Have they said
The
anything?
ISA, I don't think has a stand yet, but the OSU Extension, I think, has a stand, and I think there is one chemical that shows some promise. I think it's that imidacloprid, and it's a soil drench. But the problem is, you know, it kills a lot more bugs than just that emerald ash
Yes.
borer. And you really have to decide what's feasible. The interesting thing is the city of Delaware did opt to tree 800 trees this year at incredible expense. So it sets this precedent that that's a feasible thing for towns to do. And so we just have to really educate. I'll try to, you know me, I'll send you emails and.
So it'll be interesting to see if there's any human impact, so to speak, from that. Because when you spray, it's hard to just get it on the plant without getting it in the air, without the air traveling with the chemical in it. And
Well, one of the other arguments is that these chemicals are not tested through the FDA. They are tested only through the EPA. And the EPA has, see, unless you're testing for chemicals to be used on food production, that's a lot more stringent than the EPA testing. And, you know, there are going to be environmental impacts. You know, squirrels eat those seeds. Yeah, I mean, so I think there's an argument for, like, let's be reasonable here. This can be. These chemicals have to be applied at least annually. Even the researchers saying that.
of course.
And so, you know, there's a huge expense, and you might lose your tree anyway. Or if the tree becomes a hazard and your drops a branch on your neighbor. So we just have to kind of, maybe that's something we can work on in a working meeting to come up with a policy.
Well, the city would then maybe have, a city doing that might have liability if there were health effects down the road.
I'm assuming Delaware was quite invested in ash trees, and that's why they made this. And we're not. I mean,
Right.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's true.
So I'm guessing they
It must have
had
been like a subdivision or something. I didn't
Yeah.
realize.
yeah, that's all they planted. I'm sure they had a huge amount. Yeah, and we don't have quite that extensive.
But I think it's an opportunity to educate in private property owners, because what they do on their property does impact us as a community.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to see more prudent use of chemicals.
Oh, yeah.
You know, good ODNR, you know, use of Roundup and everything. So it's a chance for us to be leaders, I think.
Educate people.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on the ash borer. The next item is Anne's Tree Care Conference. If you'd like to tell us all the details and how people can get information about it.
Okay, well, you'll start to see registrations in some public areas. They'll be put out at the libraries in Athens County. The date is September 25th. We've got 5 speakers talking on a wide variety of tree care topics, including tree pruning, so that'll be a good one. If you do have questions or want a registration, call 740-589-9910.
And what does it cost, registration?
$15,
And
and
that
that includes lunch with purple chopsticks.
What a
so
bargain.
It is such a bargain.
It is a bargain, no kidding.
Although you have
And
to
it's
compete,
always good.
but you got to compete with all those, you know, those OU facilities guys, you know, those big hungry guys. So you know, you've got to be first in line.
No, even those people who come later have been well fed.
Yes.
Right.
And I really was talking about the programs that have, the speakers that have been on these programs.
Right.
They're always good, they're always valuable.
So
Yeah,
it's
it's a
been
fun day.
a very worthwhile, enjoyable
We
day.
should try to get the city, some of the street personnel to come, because those are really ultimately the people who are managing our community forests. And we all, you know, we're the choir, but if we could get you know, if they could take a day, or even if they can't get away for the whole day, if they could come in and see the pruning, I think they'll get something out of it.
And this, I would say, is one thing that Paul might actually get something out of from some of the things I've seen. I've seen
We already
presented.
talked about it today, and I'm going to register tomorrow.
Wonderful,
Great.
wonderful.
Wow. We are limiting to 100 people, so don't get worried. Get your registrations in soon, so that.
Okay, thank you, Anne. I do have an item of other business. The mayor asked me to put together a list of properties which we have either had reported all the way through to the law director, or we are probably at the point where we need to involve the law director in enforcement. These include some properties on Stewart Street, 60, 62, 64 and 68, 131 Mill, Bennigan's, Taco Bell, it is Taco Bell, isn't it, on East State Street, and McDonald's on Richland Avenue. I'm not sure if you got a copy of this, Chuck.
No, I haven't.
I sent a copy to the rest of the Tree Commission, but I have a feeling your email address was not on that list.
Yeah,
So I need to
send mine to Teresa
Okay.
at the office.
Okay.
What is her city address? I've been sending it to her personal. Should,
Have to call her and ask her.
okay,
I haven't had time to even find that out.
Yeah, because she has a new last name too.
You can send it to Carter,
Teresa.
T Carter at CI dot, whatever it is, Athens
Yeah.
dot.
So it's
Or the new last name, either one works.
I'm not sure what's her new last name.
Garen.
Garen.
G-E-R-R-A-N.
Very good. Okay. So anyway, that is something I thought. I met the mayor. I think it was it yesterday or the day before, because I met Paul at the same time. Wednesday, was it?
Wednesday
Yeah,
morning.
yeah. And he asked me to forward these particular troublesome issues to him, because I think he wants to see some follow-up on this. And some of these I noted have been outstanding since 2003. So we've been doing this for a good long time, and those of you I think Bennigan's is nowhere near as long as that, but it feels like it sometimes.
The trees are dying. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and in fact, I think one compromise that could be offered to many of these people would be to put it under the new tree ordinance, under the new landscape ordinance, because I think it might make it a lot easier for these properties to comply. Because I remember with Bennigan's, we had some issues right at the start with that one, with the way the ordinance required the parking lot to be laid out and trees planted caused problems for the fire chief to move his fire engines in there. And, I understand that, and that was one of the driving forces behind getting the landscape ordinance changed. So I think I hate to see them go all the way through to an enforcement action. I'd much rather see trees planted than people spend time in court and so on. But,
Out of curiosity, why would Paul come to you as opposed to going to the code enforcement office for this information? I mean, you just talked a little bit about how, we tell them how many trees they need, it's up to code enforcement to, verify.
I may already have the email, I just haven't seen it
Okay.
yet.
yeah.
I would,
But no,
I would say that I do.
Is this comprehensive then? Do you feel this covers everything? I mean, see, that's one of the questions that I would have is this, have you you stay close enough to this to know.
I went back
where
through the
problems
records and
were.
I found this list. I mean,
Okay.
he was aware of Bennigan's and Taco Bell, but there was also McDonald's of the recent. And then if you go back several more years, we've had these properties on Stewart Street that they were very difficult properties to deal with under the old landscape ordinance, and that's why I suggest that that we may be much better off trying to get them to comply under the new landscape ordinance and live with that than trying to do with the old one. The old one tended with these small properties to require many more trees to be planted than the new one does, particularly once you got down below 10,000 square feet. It was almost coming up to 100% tree coverage for the lot. It wasn't a reasonable thing to do. But that's what it was, and people were not doing it. So, but now it's a case of, yes, it should be the code enforcement that is doing this on our behalf. but we're the people that they only have so many code enforcement officers.
Well, I'm not
We've
trying
got
to be critical. What I'm trying to do is make sure we're comprehensive about making,
Yeah.
that, and I don't, I just.
Now, anything that we do would go through code enforcement anyway, and be coordinated with them. They are the department in the city that we turn to when we find a property that isn't conforming. We have, the 5 tree commissioners plus the alternates. That means we've got 7 pairs of eyes out there looking beyond what Chuck and his officers have got. We also have to rely heavily on people to report to us where there are trees that have died and need to be replaced, or where a property owner is not fulfilling their obligations, which many people realise are required for these properties. So please tell us if you think there are trees missing. Okay. Is there any other business?
I have one.
Yes.
I've been working with the architect that is doing the remodeling at 6 and 8 Kern Street, and he's asked me if he could count the trees that are on the right-of-way, which would be on the north side of the property, which is right next to, and I couldn't answer a question why he couldn't, other than he has an approved plan by the tree commission telling him he can't.
That's right, he can't because they're not on his property.
Right. Well, he said that he's having difficulty locating the trees. Apparently, he has names of trees that are recommended to be planted there. And,
yeah, they're only recommendations. We have a much more extensive list of large shade trees. If he finds some trees that are not on that list, then he comes to us. We can certainly look at them and approve them.
Then to get on the agenda next month, and then just call you or call Alvy, or how do I do this?
David Simcoff is going to be the chair for the next meeting.
Okay.
And so you'll be in touch with him. However, I'll be around until the Friday before the meeting, and so I'll be contacting you about that time to assemble the agenda. So I think the deadline you need to give people is the it'll be September the meeting's September the 11th, but the Friday deadline will then be the 5th, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, September 5th it should be the deadline for getting things into us for that meeting.
I may be able to solve this with the architect.
Yeah, and
if I can't, well then I'll...
If you in the meantime, you contact me or any one of the tree commissioners. There are several of us who can give you an immediate yes or no, I think, on whether this species is acceptable or not.
Okay.
Because we have lists of trees. Emily's probably, and Lee, they're both, and David as well, Jared. I mean, you could even call Anne, and I'm sure she'd give you some.
Yeah, really, don't wait. On those, those are easy ones usually. You know, that
they shouldn't
we're
have to
happy to
read.
help.
I mean, there's a
us or
list of
anything.
trees you can't plant, and the others are all legitimate, but it's just that there's some which are going to have greater chance of survival, and that's why we recommend some.
Yeah.
But it's just a recommendation.
There's going to be a lot of cars in this backyard of these 2 houses. And
So there are going to be some species going to work better than others.
Yeah.
You know, and he can plant whatever he wants as long as it's not on the do not plant list. But then he's going to have
It's a
to
shade
keep
tree.
replacing them until he
Right.
finds one that works.
Yeah.
Whereas if he starts off with a recommended one, then the chances are better.
and they 30 feet between trees too, is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah.
Okay.
For them to count. I mean, if he goes to one of the local nurseries, they could also make a recommendation. I mean, they know what trees can be planted in parking lots.
But it has to be a shade tree. It can't be an ornamental flowering.
Yeah.
Can't be.
Yeah, large shade tree is the.
Well, if I can't resolve it, then I'll get him on the agenda for next
Yeah,
meeting.
okay.
That'd be fine.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. But no, we did look at that site with that in mind, and we said no, those trees belong to that right of way. They're not part of this property, and so they can't be counted.
So he came to the board and was told this.
I don't recall whether he actually came to the board, but the question was asked,
Okay.
and it was discussed,
Okay.
and I think Alvy put that in the letter that went to him.
Okay.
It definitely was discussed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll try to get it solved then.
Do you, John?
Well, you had another item about the benches on Court Street. And,
Yes, thank you for
and
reminding
also
me.
the cast iron
Yes.
grates.
Yeah. various people now have got interested in the possibility of tree guards. I had a brochure I've had for a while from a company that sells these things. The Chamber of Commerce has expressed some interest in trying to get tree guards put around some of the trees on Court Street. We've now had a request from one of the people who owns a business on Court Street as well, with the suggestion that the tree guard incorporate a bench around it, which again, I think is a wonderful idea. I think we should encourage people to think along these lines. I understand Ron Lucas is on leave at the moment, but he's the person I'm trying to coordinate this with the city, because it'll have to be somebody in the streets department, I think, that is going to be consulted eventually about exactly what we should do, and they may even finish up coming to council, because I know we've had issues in the past about people putting seats in the street and things like that. So, but yes, I'm glad you reminded me.
Yeah, I think the Uptown Business Association is interested in trying to make the street more pedestrian friendly and set up some places for people to sit and things like that. My only concern about the tree grates would be to make sure that they're properly installed, because I mean I think there are some there that are just set in the opening, and then they settle, and or you could step on them and they kind of tilt or something like that. They're supposed to have an angle that carries them and keeps them at the surface, and I think that my recommendation would be make sure that they're properly installed.
Yes, yeah, I think that's certainly been one of my concerns as well, that we get these things installed professionally.
Can I add something too? It's great. Tree grates are great, especially when the trees are young. It's a little ironic that, remember when we wanted tree grates, when we were putting the trees in, no one, because they're $500 a piece. They're very expensive. Now that the trees are older, it's going to be really hard to install them without damaging the tree. So I hate to be the mean cold water pourer on this, but plus once you get them in, you got to keep, you have to weld them and kind of pull the welding back, because they can girdle the tree.
Most of them are designed to cut out. So
but it's hard to happen. Like a lot of times, John, that it doesn't happen until the trees actually cause. And Zanesville, Chillicothe had beautiful grates, and they actually pulled them up. Zanesville pulled all theirs out. And remember, I was trying to get them for you guys when you were, I was trying to actually get them to sell them to the city of Athens, because that would have been the time to use them when we were installing new trees. I think it's.
Well, in some of these cases, we may be talking about doing it for new trees, because there'll be sites where we've had trees lost and there'll be new trees. But what I want to do, and your concern is right, and I think I want to bring it in with what John was saying about if we can get the people, the owners, to buy into the fact that this is their tree and it needs to be looked after, then maybe we need to set up a procedure so that down the road the city realises that it's going to have to cut these things out once the trees become established. The guards can be, sorry?
And cigarettes go into the, litter gets into you can't pull it out.
Yeah, you have to live with that, but we live with the nasty black spots on the sidewalks anyway.
But that could be dealt with if the city would invest in a sort of a vacuum cleaner for those areas. Well, it could be similar to like a shop vac, where.
But then it pulls the mulch out too.
Well, one of the things that I was interested in the fact was that Chris, the person who asked about the seats, has been in touch with a representative of a company. And I think what we need is to get one of them, a representative down here, talking with Ron Lucas, Randy Stone, about exactly what we're going to have to do, and bring your concerns in at the time and say, look, how do we address all these things?
And there might be areas, like I'm thinking of the AT&T parking lot where there are those 2 golden rain trees, like bigger places where, like maybe you don't want to congregate people on the street next to a tree, because that's when the branches get pulled off, but maybe those kind of out of the way places, there might be some places where where there aren't even trees right now that we could.
I think the Uptown Business Association wants to do it well, and I think they want to work with Paul and other people in the city. I mean, they don't want to. I mean, there are people who have an interest in getting a bench by their establishment. Chris is one of those, but I think the group in general would like to just look at it, and there were discussions about trying to take a look at past plans for streetscape and things like that to do it. So I think they're trying to get some momentum. I mean, they've been talking about a lot of things, the lights on the buildings and a variety of things to make Athens a bit more attractive and maybe more competitive, or try to compete better with East State Street and other places. So I mean, I think that's what it's all about, is how can we make sure people know we're here and want to come there and things like that. So I think they want to do it well.
Yeah. Well, that's great.
The conversation right now is focused, and a lot of it's just like John's saying, specifically with the tree guards, is to target the most vulnerable trees on Court Street. My understanding is that there's been a few that are chronically being replaced, to try to protect those so that we don't have to continue going back towards them. But the main focus is legitimately on protecting the trees, but also making a good streetscape, making it as pedestrian friendly as possible, cleaning up the cigarette butts. We're trying to look at the code and see how we can get ashtrays on the street to try to at least reduce that. You put ashtrays out in front of most of these bars, you're probably going to reduce 80% of the cigarette butts off the street, which makes it a lot easier for the shopkeepers to clean up the remaining butts in the morning. Might reduce some of the animosity from towards some of the bar owners and things like that relating to that issue. But we're also trying to develop, we want people to be able to sit on the street, be able to sit down, have their ice cream or just relax. So we are looking at that, and somebody suggested that the tree benches might be an ideal way to do it. And it may work, we don't, but we're scoping all this out right now. But we know there's going to be, there's, just like you said, there's the ideas you had, those are things that hadn't come up yet, that the guards could actually be a problem installing them, so.
Maybe we need
Well,
to.
now,
Stick with the new trees. That's
are we making a distinction between the grates and guards, metal guards that are around the trunks of young trees?
We're going to.
Okay, because it seems to me that we really need the guards around the
Yeah.
trunks more than we need the grates.
Yeah, it's just that the grates are needed
The grates are
to hold the guard in place.
We
That's
just
the,
Okay.
have, most of these just have some loose mulch.
Yeah.
Yes.
The mulch gets kicked around and you have exposed dirt, and then the cigarette butts start coming in there, so.
I have to just
Are-
say though that, go on.
Are there any grates that are really fairly wide so that there's plenty of room for the tree trunk to grow before you have to remove them?
Yeah, they're about to come
Definitely,
in.
oh yeah, yeah. If you look in the catalogue I've got there, that there's space up to about a foot in many of these places.
Just the trick, getting the tree right in the middle.
Yeah.
It's easier with when you're doing it all
Yeah,
at the same time.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just, have you guys, the trees are looking so good. I mean, they're all eclectic, which I think is one of the things that I really like it about Athens. You got an oak, then you got the honey locust, and they really are coming onto their,
It was designed that way.
I know, it looks so nice, and they're getting big.
Biodiversity.
And just
That was for you,
driving,
though, 'cause
No, it was a case of
struggled.
finding the right tree for the right
Yeah.
spot.
Yeah, I mean, we struggled finding the narrow ones for the buildings that were really close and convincing people that they wanted trees and just, I wanted you to know, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. Robin Todd Hunter deserves a gold medal for getting those in there.
And we still have a couple of open spots, is that correct? On
Yes.
Yeah,
Court?
they're free, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but driving down Court Street now, it just looks entirely
It
different.
does.
But from what it did years ago, before there were any but a few and a couple of spots.
When did this start, the trees?
They've been trying to plant trees for
Yeah.
20 years.
The last big
but-
push was probably about 3 or 4 years ago, when several members of the current tree commission really sat down and tried to figure out where to put some prestigious trees that would survive in the narrow spots and where there was space for broader trees to be planted. But prior to that, Anne's right, Robin Todd Hunter, who was the chair of the commission before Alvy, I think, she'd been trying to get trees planted at various places, and I imagine she must be the one responsible for the ones closer to the university where there are some bigger trees
Yeah.
planted.
There were two streetscapes. The first round was real hard. We weren't real organized and getting in with all those players who were putting in money to do facades and do sidewalk. And then I think with Albee came on, that second, when we went down the hill,
Yeah.
it was a lot better.
And also the city, when they redid the sidewalks or whatever, well, when that was done, and tree pits were put in. So then we had the spots available and could go ahead. Here are some.
Yeah. Anyway, Paul, would it make sense for us to have you as the coordinator for these things? So I'd been thinking of dealing with this through Ron Lucas and the Streets Department, because I'm thinking there in terms just sheer technical terms, but the sound of it, you're engaging at the planning level of trying to get this thing. So does it make sense for us to be sort of focusing things towards
It
you?
certainly may, as long as you're not asking me to have any knowledge specific about trees, because
No,
I can't tell the difference.
but I mean,
from another,
some of the issues that we're hearing about are more to do with planning than they are with.
Yeah, I would say
Yeah.
offhand, go to me, and
Yeah.
then I can bounce it to Ron if I
Yeah.
don't have the answer.
Okay.
But I have a concern about having a bench around the tree, which sounds really nice. But if there's a bench and you step up, then you can reach even higher to pluck off the branches that are struggling to survive.
No, that's
Get a
another-
knife and
Another reason to get them pruned
They don't
up
even
to
need
the-
a knife, they just get a good...
And I think it's just something that people were talking about. It may not be the right solution, and in fact, sidewalks are pretty narrow, and to bump it out with
Right.
it may not work. You may have to have them in the line with the tree or something, or something.
Yeah, but benches may be better served
Yeah.
directly abutting buildings.
Yes,
Right,
absolutely.
right, so I think that's part of where it's at. It's in, they're just talking about ideas. I don't
Yeah.
think that they have anything specific. They just want to do something, and they want to try to be an advocate and try to help the city decide where maybe to put resources or look for options for funding, and whether it's property owners or submitting a grant application or whatever it is. I think they just want to be prepared and decide what the priorities ought to be, a part of deciding what the priorities ought to be, because they are the businesses in the community.
Well, Dave, the city has a tables, benches, and chairs ordinance for Court Street.
Really?
We already have one. Yeah. That's all the ones at the coffee shops and at the restaurants. They all have a permit issued through the code office,
But they have to be off,
off the right of
they
way.
have to be off the right of way, and they have to be out, they can't be out after closing, I believe.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're talking 24 hours a day, 7
Yeah.
days a week.
That's part of the conversation.
Well, and I think it was as Paul had said, somebody said, if you buy an ice cream at what is Stone Cold Ice Cream or whatever, and come out instead of sitting
Sounds
inside,
pretty good.
where do you sit?
Yeah.
You sit on the step or something, or you try to find a wall or whatever, there's just not a lot of options. And so if you were to bring your family up there and had kids or something, it'd be nice to have a place where you could sit down and do that. And that's part of the thinking.
Yeah. Too bad we couldn't tear up some of the concrete in those parking lots and make some green space.
But I think that is a nice idea, that there, particularly of trees that are established, you kind of have a bench that curves around, or even in circles. And if they're in units, then as the tree grows, one could probably, move them out. But so that people do, and in places where it won't be in the way.
If there's trees that need to be replaced, has the city thought of raised beds, and part of that raised bed, a bench in there, so the tree would actually be elevated by 2 feet or something like that?
There are not many trees that can be used in raised beds, though.
Okay, it would just add an extra 2 feet.
Well,
Or
it
would they
would
tip
still
over?
have the tree pit below it. But
Yeah,
it would
yeah.
be-
Well-
You would raise up the thing around it.
I don't know about structure and whether or not when they get too big would it be unstable, but it would be an effective way. But it could restrict the flow down the, this is just obviously a suggestion. It might close off, but it'd be a way of having a bench built in with you not, people sitting on it, they're not any closer to those lower hanging branches
Yeah.
as though they were just sitting on the
I
ground.
see,
Uh-huh.
yeah. So it's
Yeah,
a way
raises
of
the height
getting
of
the
the tree.
tree higher up, yeah.
A little bit more better, more soil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, does that, would they be more exposed to, more temperature sensitive then? Because you've got root mass, which is
They're exposed
not.
now.
Yeah, I wouldn't, I mean, with everything with concrete and I don't, to tell you the truth, it'd probably be more buffered if you made it out of wood or something like that to insulate a little bit
No,
better.
I meant because it's up higher, because it's not at, soil level, but that's true, you're surrounded by.
Probably would dry out more quickly.
Yeah.
Potentially, yeah.
But that's a thought.
That's just
yeah.
another idea,
Yeah.
that you could get a bench and it'd be probably fairly cheap to do that.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, very good. I think we've talked our way around that one quite well. Anything else before we do the minutes of the last meeting? That's the only thing I've got left on the agenda. Okay. So, do people need copies of the minutes at all from the last meeting? Or have you,
No, I've got one.
have you read them? Or I've not had Alvy tell me of any mistakes, because she's usually the eagle-eyed person, the one that really checks. So I hope there aren't any mistakes on here. I can report that 32 East State Street, a compromise was established with that one, and we don't need to do any more with that one. That was an outcome that turned out quite well. Yes, thank you, Chuck.
Well, the mayor let Andy Stone look at it,
Yeah.
so that worked out real good.
Is it too late to have a report about what happened there?
Well, Andy Stone's the street superintendent,
Yeah.
and he's also an engineer, and
Yeah.
he came up with a drawing that could protect the base of the tree, and the property owner, well, the manager of the property agreed to do the sidewalk with what Andy has recommended.
Oh, well, that's great.
And I haven't been down there for a couple of days, so it may even be done by now. I haven't looked. So you're going to have the sidewalk angled away from the tree, going both directions, so that the rain will go both ways, and then there'll be some coming towards the tree, and I think it's going to work good and save the tree.
Well done.
Great, great.
So are there any corrections I need to know?
No, looks good.
Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll approve the minutes.
Okay, second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Minutes are approved. The next meeting will be Thursday, September 11th, as we've already discussed. Dave Simcoff will be chairing the meeting. Both Alfie and I will be missing, and therefore we encourage the alternates to be here if at all possible. We need a minimum of 3 tree commissioners, and so the alternates may well be needed to make up that absolute minimum of 3, just in case.
Are you guys going somewhere fun?
I'm going to Crete.
Oh, that sounds fun.
sounds
to a conference there. So I will be working.
Yeah, likely story.
I actually have to deal with a internet conference with people in California, and so they're going to be at, I think it'll be 9 o'clock in the morning there and 6 o'clock in the evening where I am at some point.
And you'll all be speaking English?
Oh no, this is separate from the conference. This is something I have to do for work.
Oh.
It's separate from the conference. That I have.
So you're going to be working within a working.
Yes. We have to multitask nowadays. That's the only way to do it. If there's no further business, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for.